Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
I'm ANITA FINLEY, and you're listening, of course, to the BOOMER Times radio show. And we have our special guest today, Douglas Lidwell, who's the pastor and director of the Fort Lauderdale campus of Faith Farm Ministries. Boy, there's been a lot going on. I can't wait for you to tell us what's happening there, Pastor.
It is certainly a unique time, is it not?
Oh, my. That's right. Words are hard to come by. We all want to be positive, but it's hard, right? Not so easy.
Well, but there are blessings involved. While this is an unprecedented time, no one in living memory has ever gone through something like this. I think it's a century or so since the Spanish flu pandemic. There's never been an economic shutdown of this kind. There are blessings involved. Here on our campus, of course, our thrift store operations are closed, but because of that, we're able to take even more time in class. Our students are able to dig deeper into the wounds that are the cause and source and origin of their addiction.
Yes.
We're really trying to take advantage of this, not only in the afternoons, we're spending some time beautifying the campus, cleaning up some old messes and slapping a coat of paint on this and that, but we're really being able to focus on those so important issues that have brought everyone here. And in that way, it's been a blessing. And I know many people, your listeners and others around the country, they're taking advantage of this time to be closer to their family. They're locked in with their kids. They're homeschooling people. And, and really think about it. How much time do we take with our kids in a normal day? And now we're spending all day with them. And so there are some real blessings involved in this, and we should be very cognizant of those, because otherwise we're going to get real depressed sitting around with no haircut and can't even go out to eat. So.
Right. Oh, that's funny with the haircut. That's why the first thing it seemed like they started to open. I don't know why they opened tattoo shops, but they certainly did open the hairstyles, the barbershops and all that. So that's interesting. Well, I want to play on what you've been saying, because I do agree so much. I wasn't around for the Spanish flu, but we did start to read about a lot of these things, Ebola, because a lot of this really didn't affect us today. So this is rare, as you started to say, Pastor. And I have to tell you that there are many good things coming, as you said, as long as people are being careful. Now, my first question is, anybody with Faith Farm, has anyone contracted the virus at all?
No, and on our 3 campuses, we've been very blessed.
Wow.
Here in Fort Lauderdale, we closed down pretty early. We were a little bit ahead of this, and as soon as the county order went out, we went ahead and shut down our thrift store operations. And because technically we are considered an essential business, because we're both a homeless shelter and an addiction recovery center, and we do provide some resources in that way to our community. And so we could have stayed open, but we believed that the spirit of the order was that, furniture stores, for example, you're shut down. And that's how we pay for our program. Our program here, while it's a 10-month addiction recovery program, is completely free to the people who come here seeking recovery. It's all paid for by our thrift store operations. Well, we shut that down right away. And I can't say we've been quarantined, but we have very much limited our ventures off of our 10-acre campus here. We have one person who will run to the store, one person who will run to the pharmacy. Of course, the staff, anytime we go out in the community buy groceries or whatever, we're masked and gloved. And we've been taking those precautions. But here on our 10-acre campus, we all live together. We've got, well over 100, almost 150 people here on campus. And so we've been almost kind of insulated here. And the same is true in our Boynton Beach and Okeechobee campuses. They've been very blessed to have no reports of the COVID virus. No symptoms. We've had some people go get tested and come back negative, and we've been very blessed. Now, the Okeechobee campus is now open as of this week. The thrift store they're open, and we anticipate that happening in the Boynton Beach campus probably very soon, and a little bit behind that will be here in Fort Lauderdale.
So the thing, there's so many positive aspects, as you first started saying, but at least there's been no loneliness that so many other people have been affected by, because everybody can be together, right?
Well, in that sense, yes. We have a very tight-knit community here on our campus. You can imagine right now we're down, but we could have as many as 200 people on this campus, and so we're all kind of elbow to elbow. 10 acres may sound like a lot, especially to folks from the city, but your country folk listeners know 10 acres is not a big spot of land. And when you have that many people in here, you're kind of elbow to elbow, and so we've been very blessed, that we have people to talk to, but also that this virus has not crept in here. But we found creative ways to go about doing what we do. Obviously, we've also broken up our church services, and so we've broken it up into a small group setting, and so we have multiple leaders leading a small group rather than myself, one preacher preaching to the entire campus. And so it's shown us other creative ways to go about this, and I think the same is true in the economy and the business community. Once they turn the world back on, I think our economy is going to be booming even more than it was before, because everybody has had to be so creative and find different ways to do things. And we found that people really can work from home. And I think you're going to see a lot more production and just great news out of this economy as things ramp back up.
Well, we just have so much unemployment. That's the big problem, that we have to figure out how to get people back to work. And I guess that will happen as people start to go to the stores and start to buy things and be a part of it. I will say that companies like Publix and places like that they've been very careful, but they've remained open, I think, through the whole time, haven't they?
Yeah, and they're really essential. Imagine going through this and you can't even go to the grocery store. If you remember, in the first week or two of this, some of the shelves were stripped bare, and
yes.
it was very concerning. But that is normalized. Imagine if those just were completely closed down, we would all be in a real pickle.
Right.
But I think as soon as we get the go-ahead from the CDC and from both state, local, and federal government to go back, I think everybody that has laid people off is going to bring them right back. If you think about it, there is nothing wrong with the American economy except large parts of it have been put on pause for a time. As soon as they push the pause button and we go back to work, this thing is going to take off.
Well, I really hope that what you're saying is true, because I know a lot of people who are struggling right now. But I'm going to talk to you about the article that's coming. That we just finished our May issue, and it's just out now. And I want to tell you that article on hope was very, very good. Did you get a chance to read it?
Yes, of course. Wonderful article.
Wasn't it?
The
whole word hope was so necessary for everyone. And of course, it did bring out people who, so one of my last guests just said, it showed that people do want to help one another. That brought out, and all around the world, which we haven't had to happen before. But whether you were in Europe or you were in Africa, everybody was concerned and wanted to help. But that was something really beautiful, I thought.
I have to agree. I think one of the drawbacks of living in large communities, such as here in South Florida, is that you lose some of the small town feel. I'm from a tiny little town in western Illinois. It's literally 3 blocks wide between a couple of cornfields. And everybody there knows one another, and they're kind,
right.
and they're generous, and they're warm. But you can't do that if you live around more than a few hundred people. When you live around tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, you just don't have it within you to be that warm and generous with everybody you come across. And in many ways, it's not safe to do so. And so people kind of become insular. Well, with this pandemic thing, and it's all kind of nearly on lockdown, we've made little villages out of our apartment community or our neighborhood, or sometimes
right.
Just the 2 or 3 houses that you're near. And so people are getting back to their normal, natural state, which is being friendly and kind and generous to one another.
True, and that's so beautiful. My guest is Douglas Lidwell, who's pastor and director of the Fort Lauderdale campus for Faith Farm Ministries, and you can still contact them. You may not be able to go into their store yet. It's coming, but you can get on their website, which is faithfarm.org. You can buy things on their website. You can sell things around. They have to pick them up. Eventually, they will do that. But you can you can also donate. That's what he was just saying. It's really important because they've had to stop, a lot of the activities that they make money from, and that's why They didn't put any of their students out, though. They still kept taking care of them. They still kept doing everything, even though the cash was short. So let's make that up for them, because they do something that's so amazing every single day. And I know we've had you talk about this, and I don't want to throw this on you too fast, but can you give us a few instances, or let's say stories, that people can relate to of what your organization has really been responsible for? I know so many of the stories, and I always like to add that, so that you're a real organization of people, not just talk. And I know some of your people have just made great strengths and they help one another. That's the one thing you do all the time. But let's see if we can just brighten up someone's day today.
Well, sure. I have said many times, and I think I've even told you in our past meetings, this ministry is the most fruitful ministry that I've ever seen, let alone been a part of. The transformation that our students go through in just a 10-month stay, and you may think that 10 months sounds like a long time to be out of the world, but when you're talking about attempting to not only get people off of drugs and alcohol, but change the very way that they think, the way they think about God, the way they think about themselves, the way they think about society, the way they think about their family, it's not a lot of time to change people's lifelong habits of dealing with any of life's difficulties by running off into their coping mechanisms and their defense mechanisms, which for these guys, we're talking about drugs and alcohol. Everybody has a defense mechanism and a coping mechanism. Some for some it's sports, people who are sports fanatics. Others are workaholics. Other people's are religious fanatics. All of them are coping mechanisms, and all of them are defense mechanisms. Our students just happen to have chosen a defense mechanism, a coping mechanism that's particularly destructive in drugs and alcohol. And I see transformations take place that are mind-boggling. And I speak to other pastors who are in what we would call a traditional church, and they're shocked because they will have that family sitting on the third pew, and in 20 or 25 years, they might see, a hand bit of spiritual growth. Well, I've got these guys that we take them from what we call crackhead crazy to son of God in 10 months.
I love that.
And the transformations are profound. I remember it was just about a year ago, a little over, I had two men sitting side by side in class, and one stood up and he shared his story of being raised on a private island off the coast of Georgia by his father was extremely wealthy. He and his brother and sister were frequently helicoptered off the island to go to Atlanta Braves games. His first car was a limo, and he's sitting next to a man who reported that when he and his brother would get home from school, they had to wait in line because their house was a crack house.
Oh, my.
And these two men are sitting next to each other, and they both stood up and they told stories that were so similar in terms of the wounds from their childhood and the lies that they believed about themselves and about life and about God. It was almost as if they were reading one another's stories, though they came from such dramatically different backgrounds.
Wow,
and it
that's
just shows
amazing.
it's we're all in this thing together. Ever since Adam ate the wrong fruit, we are all in this mess of being raised by flawed and imperfect people who may have done the very best they could, but could not be what we absolutely need, which is perfect and having perfect intimacy with our Father. And so we help them to make that connection with God the Father through God the Son and through the power of God the Holy Spirit. And we see a transformation in these men that is nothing short of astounding. It is truly every week. I know we've been here 7 years now, and I never get used to seeing the transformations that we see in these guys.
Yes, and that's why I've always loved to go to graduations, because I always see that same thing with the women or the men and the camaraderie between them now. That's the one point that you just brought up. I mean, like worlds apart, and yet they're still human beings with the same souls and the same requirements, needs, and that's a great story, really. Well, so now thinking about this coronavirus, people are going to be able to take this with them to their grandchildren. This is a whole new experience now that they've had that no one else really has had in and probably with most people who are living today.
Yeah, our younger daughter is 19, and we're telling her she's going to be able to tell her grandchildren that she lived through the COVID-19 thing all the way back in the 2020s,
right.
and she'll be referring to that the way my grandfather spoke about being raised in the Great Depression, and then going off to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, and she's going to have stories like that. They may not be as exciting. She'll talk about not having haircuts and everybody's beards growing out, but it'll be okay.
Well, you really are such a fine, upstanding person, and I want to ask you, why did you ever not get involved in any of these things that were addictive? Is it just your personality isn't addictive, or what do you attribute that to?
This is going to sound weird to you, but I attribute it to the fact that I am a non-smoker that was raised in a tiny little house by two parents who smoked like they were on fire. And so the first time someone passed me a joint, I can remember the day it happened. I was 15 years old, and I was in the back of a car on the way to a summer league basketball game. I was the only junior in a car full of seniors. I was a skinny little nerd who only wanted to be accepted by these older kids. And so when this thing was passed across the front seat and then came to the back and then handed to me, I overcame my peer pressure and my desire for acceptance because he was passing me the one thing in the world I despised the most. And I said, no. And he just flinched back and said, okay, fine, more for the rest of us. And so I never... Yeah, I just never got into weed, which is the gateway drug. And unfortunately, marijuana is being normalized in our culture today. In many states, it's now legal. And but it is the very thing. And almost all of the people who come here for addiction recovery will tell you it all started out with weed. It started out with pot. And because I never got into that, well, I never went on to the harder drugs. If he had passed me a brownie, I might be here in the same boat as the rest of these guys because I love
addiction of brownies.
But what he passed me was the thing I despised most in the world at the time.
Yeah, interesting.
And so I had the ability to say no, and it never led me into, cocaine and heroin and pills and all the stuff that guys do. Right.
Well, but that's an interesting story that I'm sure you tell people, and that you tell a lot of the students who come in there. So. Because so many people do have different kinds of addictions here. You said that before, and that's true. But some, of course, are more serious. And years ago, when Pappy first started Faith Farm, he really wasn't concerned with pills, right? It was just pretty much alcohol. Is that what it was?
It was almost entirely alcohol. The way it started is he was out driving with a friend one night. They saw a man drunk on the side of the road. They scooped him up, brought him home, gave him some coffee, and preached him the gospel. The man got saved and sobered up. The next morning, they dropped him off, and they went out the next night to do it again. And 69 years later, we have 3 campuses across South Florida serving 450 beds with a 10-month addiction recovery program. We serve, I think it's something like 1,000 meals a day between the 3 campuses. It's a big deal that started from something very small, and it was just alcohol at the time. And then, by the mid-'60s, it started to be a lot of marijuana. By the mid-'70s, you're filled up with cocaine, and then you had the crack thing of the late '80s, and it's just moved on from there. And now, if you get somebody who's only a crackhead, you're like, oh, well, okay, that's pretty good. If somebody's only an alcoholic, you're like, oh, okay, we got some work to do here. So there's drugs out there now, and they come out with new ones all the time, but these things are just mind-boggling.
Yeah. My guest is Douglas Lidwell. He's the pastor and director of Fort Lauderdale campus at Faith Farm Ministries, and you can contact them with donations. Hopefully you'll do that. faithfarm.org. They're one of the best organizations to fund. I tell that to everyone. That's really my favorite organization, although I'm involved in a lot of them. I see every day what goes on. I mean, I've been very close to so many people there, and I rave about it. I rave about this organization because it's not easy. I mean, I know that when Pastor Lidwell gets on and he just talks quickly and beautifully about everything, but boy, when they get someone in there who's really been down in the, I would call it the sewer in a way, or maybe they had to go to jail, but to save them wasn't easy. Just saying, okay, you're here now, we're going to take care of you, right? How long does it take for someone to kind of get rid of this resistance, Pastor Lidwell?
Well, anywhere from 10 minutes to 10 years. Breaking through the denial of, I don't really have a problem. It's not, I don't have a problem. It's that my wife has a problem with my problem, or the judge has a problem with my problem. I think it was Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones who, when asked about his drug problem, said, drug problem? I don't have a drug problem. I've had problems with the police because of drugs. But a lot of people are unwilling to go past this idea that as a man, I'm strong, I'm capable, I can do anything. And if I could quit this if I wanted to, I just really don't want to. And that can take, that can be a moment's process to work through that. Or they might have to have more pain, more humiliation, more shame, more consequences, more fines, more prison time, until they finally get to a place where they say, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. This is stronger than me, and I need help. And so it's different for everyone.
Yes, and help comes in different forms. There are so many organizations and they're very expensive that you can go, and probably some people are helped, but it's not the same because I know, and I've heard about this, that many of those people wind up at Faith Farm because it just didn't work the way it was being presented.
Well, what we tell people ask us, does Faith Farm work? Okay, the answer to that is yes, it works as long as you work it. You're not going to come here to Faith Farm and do 10 months and then you're done. We're only here to give you a 10-month, basically, boot camp on the habits and the lifestyle to pursue once you're past the farm. But that's true of everything else. Recovery works as long as you work it. And I want to say to your listeners, if you have family members, loved ones, children, grandchildren who are in addiction, we know how painful that is, not just for the person, but for the entire family. But there is hope because recovery works, but it only works as long as you work it. If you're going through AA or NA, that works as long as you're working it. If you go to the Salvation Army or one of the many other wonderful programs, those all work as long as you're working it. The moment you stop working it, it stops working.
So don't you feel, and I'm sure that I believe this, that living together there with all your instruction and all your everything that you learned that works is the reason it does work so well. You have a very high percentage of it working. It's not perfect because nothing's perfect, but you when you send someone off and they just have to attend meetings, what do they do in the other times? So I think for me, seeing everyone together and working on everything at the same time and having the job that sometimes I've heard, and it's hard for me to fathom that people have never worked and that they don't even know a lot of things that it's going to take when they get back out in the world. So you have really conquered so much.
Well, it is a process, and we're always trying to find ways to improve the process. But I think you're correct. Being in an atmosphere where that is the primary focus, it is what everybody is being required to pay attention to. That really helps. One minister I really respect has a message that I've kind of borrowed, and it says you will be dominated by whatever you're focusing on. Whatever you focus on will become so overwhelming to you that you can't see past it. And so if what you're really focused on is pornography, then you're going to be dominated by pornography. If what you're really focused on is money, you will become overwhelmingly concerned with how much money you make or what's in your bank account. If you become focused on cars or Harleys or whatever your thing is, that will become so important to you that you can't see past it. I know people who simply almost act as if they can't make it if their team didn't win this week because they're so focused on that it becomes overwhelming. Well, if you're focused on bitterness and on pain and on loss and on the gunk that the world heaps on us just by being born in a fallen planet, then you become so overwhelmed by those things that you begin to seek a release from them. And the quickest release from all of that stuff, from being raised by imperfect parents, or perhaps you were abandoned, or you were molested, or you were abused in some way, the quickest release from that is into some form of drug or alcohol that's going to, for a moment, take that pain away. And people do drugs because drugs work to do that. The problem is the drugs wear off, and then you have to do them again until you've run out of money to get the drugs. And then you have to go out and find creative ways to get the money, and those creative ways aren't legal. And now you have consequences, and upon consequences, now you've lost your job, and your wife has kicked you out, and you haven't seen your kids in 7 years. And you see this thing snowballs. And what we're doing here is we're encouraging people to, instead of running away from that pain, to dig into the root, source, and origin of it. Go back to the memory where that pain began and ask the Lord Jesus to heal you right there so that you no longer need to run off into a bottle or a pipe or a pill or a needle in order to get relief from the pain, because the pain has gone. So we're not asking people to cope with pain without meds. We're asking people to get healed of the pain so they don't need the med.
You know, Pastor, I have to tell you, I've had a lot of people on from Faith Farm, and so many are so good, and I'm always enthralled, but you really are a star. I have to tell you, you are so articulate.
Well,
and
I believe that you are a star as well, and what you do for our senior community is unparalleled, and we are so thankful for everything that you do, Dr. Finley.
Well, I have to just tell you, though, I could just listen to you. You're like melodic. I mean, and I'm sure.
Well, I wish I had more students like you. Preachers love to hear that. You should come over.
Well, no, but seriously, you really, did you have training in speaking? I mean, I know that you did tell me you did radio and you did things like this before, but were you trained to do what you do? You're so articulate and inspirational. Oh, and you know what? You can't give me time now. We have to save it for the next one. We've run out of time. Yes, remember that question, okay? Think about it, because you are really terrific. So thank you, and everybody, please do go to faithfarm.org and do what you can. They're worth every minute, every dollar that you contribute. Okay, well, take care of yourself and everybody else there.
Thank you for having me on again. Great to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. All right, goodbye. We'll be back.